Hello and welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Buy Round Interview Show. Today I am joined by a person I had the pleasure of, I guess, not sharing the field with, but locking horns with. Former Manly great Jason King, and now currently, this is a bit of a mouthful, the Executive General Manager of Legal, Integrity and Risk at the NRL. Jason, thank you so much for joining us here. There's a couple of ways we can go here. We've got the fantastic playing career. We've got your life after football now. We've got that interaction. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Oh, thank you very much, James. It's congratulations on the podcast, and it's terrific to be here. So I'm happy to reflect on our battles on the field. I often find it so great when everyone in rugby league is so competitive and you play so fiercely and so tough on the field. But then it's often when you retire, you reflect back and think, oh, that was all good fun. And then you eventually catch up with these people that you might have locked horns with, so to speak, and you realise that they're terrific people, and they're just as passionate about the game as you are. And at the end of the day, it's all a bit of a laugh.
It is. And you know what's funny? Like, you lock horns with players, but if they were on your team, they're your best mates.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah. I've played with some people who I know a lot of other players didn't like. You'd meet in, like, maybe England camp or New South Wales camp or wherever it may be, and you're like, oh, they're actually all right. They're just like me.
Really
and they're
nice
just like my other mates at my other club.
Yeah, it is amazing. And during my career, I managed to lock horns with some great English players. Yourself is one. I also got tangled up with the Burgess brothers at one stage. Early on in my career, it was Adrian Morley. So all these terrific English players that have come out of Australia, and from time to time I found myself, through no desire of my own, in some type of battle on the field against them. But it's great that we can look back now and reflect and have a bit of a laugh.
It sure is. It's been a big week for the club that you represented, the area that you're from. One of your former teammates has rocked the world of the NRL. We've had it played out on television. I know obviously you're in a role at the NRL and you've got to remain impartial, but as a Manly fan, like, what's it like to see this play out the way it has?
Yeah, like you said, I'm a Manly fan first and foremost. I grew up in the area. I was born over there. I went to school across the road from Brookvale Oval at St Augustine's College. As you've said, my playing career was all at Manly. I played with Daly for a number of years, become good friends with Daly, see him often around the area still now. And reflecting on what, and I'm not intimately across it obviously, but reflecting on some of the reporting and headlines this week, as a Manly fan, I just probably feel a little bit disheartened and saddened more than anything. Daly's one of the legends of our club. He's the most capped player for the Manly Sea Eagles. He's held in very high regard by his teammates, by the Manly fans, by the Manly community. And to hear the news this week that this is his final season at Manly, like I said, you're a bit sad. He's a terrific player and hope he would be there for the rest of his playing days and potentially even beyond. But it sounds like that's not going to be the case. But having said that, I'm hoping as a supporter that Manly can get on with business this year. We've got a good side. The guys have had a pretty good start to the year, so hoping it's not too much of a distraction for them and they can go on and achieve what they want to achieve this year and have a successful season.
Yeah, no doubt it will continue to play out. We'll change tack to you, and obviously you represent the Front Rowers Club, and look, there's a reputation and a stereotype around front rowers being dumb, and maybe there are some good reasons for that. But I think front rowers we're an extreme people. You're either extremely dumb or you're extremely bright. You're on the extremely bright end of the scale.
I'm not sure about that. Hopefully somewhere in the middle.
I don't think there is any middle ground. I don't think playing in the middle of the field, I think personality type, there's no normal. Like you've got to have an edge one way or the other, whether that's like through stupidity or brawn and brains, and maybe a mix of all three. A double degree holder in business and in law. What's going on there? Like, were you always big on education? Like, how did this come about? What's the obviously the burning desire to compete, lock horns, but to be educated as well.
Yeah, I often find that with front rowers, and sort of consistent with the conversation earlier about catching up with people you might have locked horns with over the years. I always find front rowers are terrific people that once you get to know them, but we all, I think, have a case of white line fever, that when we cross that line, we're deeply passionate about our team, our teammates, and we know it's our role to be aggressive and confrontational. But there's all different types behind the scenes. And in terms of my experience, I was very fortunate when I was growing up that I went to a really good school. My parents always were really supportive and encouraged me to focus on my education. I was always very interested in sport, but I had that instilled in me from the outset that, have fun playing sport. It's such a terrific thing for you to do, but at the same time, we'd like you to turn your attention to your studies and do as best as you can there. So I started with my parents, and then when I got into rugby league, I was really fortunate to have Des Hasler as a coach and a couple of other coaches on my journey that were also really supportive of me continuing my studies. The NRL was terrific as well, as was the Players Association, to provide support for athletes to continue their studies or continue some type of vocation or second interest outside of rugby league, whether that was through flexibility with the training schedule or assistance with your studies, helping with timetabling and things like that. I was really fortunate, and so throughout my career, I managed to keep studying. I found it really a good release from the intensity of rugby league. So I'd escape and head out to Macquarie University and engage with a different group of people, talk about something completely different. So whilst I knew it was going to be helpful for me down the track, and it was something I was also interested in, I also found it was sort of complementary to being a full-time athlete.
How did it fit in, I guess, with the culture of rugby league? And, looking back to when you first began playing, I'm not that far behind you, came as a professional in 2004. There was a couple of lads studying, and they were sort of the butt of the joke of, you've got your media degree, like whatever you're studying, it was, an easy piss take.
Yeah.
And I guess that the culture has now changed with every player studies. What was it like being in the mixer there, being almost one of the first, and especially studying such an intense topic?
Yeah, I think it came as a little bit of a surprise to some of my teammates, and like you said, it being a front row as well, I think it was even more surprising. But there was banter, but it was all sort of banter in very good nature. And I'm sort of pleased to say in a way that the culture has slightly changed over the years. That there's, given the efforts of the NRL and the attitude of players and the support networks, it wouldn't be unusual these days. I wouldn't think. It would be
the norm, I would say.
Yeah, quite a lot of players that, and it's not about university degrees necessarily, but a lot of players that are interested in something else, whether that's media, they're refining their skills in that regard, whether it's a trade, whether it's some type of traineeship. There's a whole range of different things that I become aware of in my role at the NRL that players are being engaged with, and it's really pleasing to see.
It is. You mentioned Des. You're a young front rower. He takes over from Manly in 2005, I believe.
04 or 05.
Yeah. How did a young front rower navigate the rookie coach in Des Hasler?
Yeah, Des was terrific. He's he had a really big impact on me as a rugby league player, and I'd also go as far to say really big impact on me as a person when you're sort of developing through those years in your early 20s. My relationship with Des started a little bit earlier than when he became head coach. He was our head conditioner for a couple of years before he became the head coach.
That's not good.
And that was interesting. He was extremely tough, but training us in a way that you needed to be to get ready for the game of rugby league. But Desi had his quirks and his way of motivating his players, and whether he was the strength and conditioning coach or whether he was a head coach, he had this innate ability to develop his players and develop his men, so to speak. And he did it in a very competitive way, which is great, setting you up to play in rugby league matches. But he also did it in a very personable way, created a really good atmosphere, created a lot of fun, a lot of jokes and banter amongst the team, which made it a really, really good experience as a player. And then I look back on it now and think having somebody like Des as a coach and a mentor and all those things that coaches are, it was I was very fortunate.
Which role was he more intense? Head conditioner or head coach?
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer. I think he was. I think he was just as intense with both. Whether it was out on the training paddock doing a fitness drill or requiring us to be precise with our plays or our game plan. Whether it was in a video session, Des always, and it's probably one of his strengths and why he's been so successful as a coach, is he always brought this level of intensity, and this level of intensity that I hadn't experienced before in my rugby league days. And so he's always been intense, Des, and I don't think he sleeps that long at night.
No.
So he's got an incredible work ethic. He's always thinking about his team, how his team can improve, how his players can improve, and at the same time, like I said, creating an atmosphere which was good to be a part of.
He certainly wasn't afraid to think and act outside the box. I know some of the Bulldogs beginning of pre-season, we'd be thrown into all sorts of crazy new ideas that Des would bring both on and off the field. Was it like that in the early days at Manly? I know the Dogs' budget wasn't really an issue, so the sleeping pods, the hyperbaric chamber, the iPads, it was all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I get asked that question about my experience with Des, I often talk about his work ethic, and then also his relentless pursuit to get better.
Yeah.
And also his resourcefulness when it comes to that.
That is a great way of describing it. Yes.
Yeah. That's probably the diplomatic way.
He probably wouldn't pay for it himself. If it's not his money he's spending, go for your life. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember him having... when we were early on, I can't remember if it was a strength and conditioning coach or whether he was a head coach at that stage, but it was about the big men being fatigued, but then also being good on your feet, so agility, and, all the things that we learn as front rowers. And so Des wanted us to improve our footwork under fatigue. So I remember him taking us one session down to Manly Dam, and there's these old bush tracks that sort of go through Manly Dam, and there's jagged rocks and trees falling over everywhere. So Desi's idea was just to get us really fatigued, and then try to navigate through some type of time trial through these bushwalks and these paths through Manly Dam. And I just remember trying to get through those sessions and thinking, I'm pretty close to falling over here. I'm under fatigue, and this terrain's quite difficult to navigate. Anyway, before we knew it, there was 3 or 4 blokes that had rolled their ankles, and there was blood running down people's shins and things like this. That's just one small example, but there's this pursuit of getting better each and every day, and just coming up with different ideas and challenging himself and challenging the team to take on new initiatives and new things. Probably a bit of a legacy, because I think people reflect back now and think that Des was a bit of a pioneer in that regard.
Do you ever watch him in his press conference and just go, mate, Give us the real Des. Yeah, like I see him after the game or before the game, and you're like, he talks in roundabouts and just almost puts on this inability to get a sentence out, and we're like, that's not the Des we know and love. Give the public what they want. Give us the real Des.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if I'm not laughing during some of his press conferences, because the way he likes to conduct those press conferences, I'm thinking the same thing. And it's funny, sometimes being an administrator in the game and liaising with head coaches from time to time and CEOs of clubs from time to time. In my new role now, I sometimes have the pleasure of having a conversation with Des about an issue that may be occurring in the game, and sometimes I'm confronted with a similar type of persona.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes I get the impression that Des is talking to me and he's never met me before in my life. So I sometimes have to say, Des, it's Kingy, one of your ex-captains. But we don't have to talk as formal.
Like just spit the sentence out.
Yeah.
Speaking of resourcefulness, like, and things you take from people, and especially a person as influential as Des, and when you consider, like, lives in the Northern Beaches, self-made, multi-millionaire, you meet him for a coffee, sit down, and he gets it in his takeaway cup. And you're like, or in a takeaway cup. What's going on here, Gaff? He's, mate, you get more in your takeaway cup than you do in the have here cups. And I'm like, what? Just what are you doing? You kind of like, if you want an extra, get another one. But just these little, the quirkiness.
Oh yeah,
is something that never leaves you.
There's probably, so he probably knows too that if he gets into the takeaway cup, he can get out of there pretty quick.
Yeah,
and then leave you with the bill.
I've never thought.
That might be another.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. I can swift exit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just got to go. Pretend.
The phone call.
Yeah.
Quick,
and then switch that persona. Awkward saying goodbye, and away he goes.
It's funny though. You think of all these things, and you think, I can't help but think there's it's part of his plan to bring his team together and motivate and create a good atmosphere. And he's always good for banter. And no matter who you talk to about Des, they often reflect on him having some really good initiatives when it comes to saving a few dollars.
Yeah. Well, he had to fork out for a few dollars that time he booted the door off. Were you in the dressing room that time?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I think I was a couple of seats down from Jamie Lyon, who nearly bore the brunt of the door. But yeah, that was a pretty intense post-match debriefing from the coach. I remember though that the game was a disaster for us. I think it was about 400 degrees out in the field. It was a really warm day, and we'd started really well. And when you start some of those games really well, you can get a little bit complacent.
Yes,
and that was exactly what happened. We got a little bit complacent, and then didn't stick to the game plan. We didn't execute like we wanted to execute. And you could just imagine that Des up in the box would have just been, they just had steam coming out of his ears, and he hadn't quite settled down by the time he got his way down to the dressing room. And
it almost gets worse. I think it's I remember one of the lads at the Bulldogs used to describe it as like the kettle on the stove, and you can just hear that whistle, that just... Oh, that's him walking down. Just the steam just it's just turning up the heat. And yeah.
Next thing you know, a door's been ripped off its hinges.
But you know what, like thinking about Des, and like he did drive standards. Like I'm assuming he was the same with you at Manly, where, you like you say, footwork under fatigue. But when you finish that drill and you go to the water, don't you dare walk.
Yeah.
Because if you drop that standard of, if you start to walk to water, it's jog to water. And he used to bake some players.
Yeah.
Like, could not understand why you would walk to water. It's like, no, that's when you rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And all those little things, you know, it's all about being a good team. It's all about teaching and coaching, resilience and accountability. And when you think about it, you think about, you know, when you're out in the field, both teams are very good teams.
Yeah.
There's only very small differences between winning and losing.
Yeah.
And it's these little things and these little behaviours that you can build up during the week. And if it's still that sort of mentality, often that's the difference between winning and losing a game.
Yeah.
And you see that over the years, and not just with Des, but I was coached by Craig Bellamy only on one occasion when I played State of Origin, but talking to a few people that have been in his system down there in Melbourne, I understand it's a very similar mentality. You know, every action is important, and there's accountability for every action that you make, and that's probably high performance sport, and trying to drive that success for your team.
Yeah, I think it was best summed up to me once as consistent application to the little things that over time compound in interest and yield results, because we have a salary cap. So it's supposed to be even. So what's going to set you and your team apart? You mentioned Coach Bellamy, Coach Hasler. Sport is about rivalry, some of it usually geographical, but often it's two successful teams that meet in big games, and the rivalry between Melbourne Storm and the Manly Seagulls in and around those sort of mid thousands was through the roof, and then into the tens as well.
Yeah, we were both during that period. We were both really strong clubs, really strong teams, and whenever we played, the intensity of those matches and the quality of those matches just went to another level. And I just remember, we got the better of them sometimes, they got the better of us. And it just set up every time we stepped on the field, and you know, one that comes to most listeners' mind will be the Battle of Brookvale, when it probably went that little bit too far, but a lot of fans look back on that quite fondly. But whenever we played against the Storm, and no doubt it was the same for them, they went up a level, and it meant something a little bit more than the 2 points. But at the end of the day, you know, it was some cracking rugby league. Those games were terrific. We played in some big matches against each other in grand finals. It was incredible. When you're in it, competing, you know, you're competing as hard as you want, and as a front rower, you've got to be aggressive, take no prisoners, and they were exactly the same. And it was across the field. But you look back on it now, and no doubt there was a sense of this at the time. Is just respect. You know, they're obviously at the peak of their powers. They're driving the good behaviours of training as well, and you're coming up against some really good competition, and you know, there's a lot of respect for them. And you know, I reflect on it now, looking back. You know, how great it was to be a part of those games and play against such quality opposition. You know, play against a team that was getting coached by one of the best coaches of all time. Terrific system they had down there. Some other great people they had down there in Frank Panisi, and think, it was just great to be a part of it. But you also think about the Storm and the success they've been able to have over such a long period of time. Here we are, you know, punters and fans are talking about them being, you know, the favourites of the competition in 2025. They haven't really wavered from being the favourites for the competition for a better part of 20 years. So even though we were in intense rivals during that period, you can't help but tip your hat to them.
I love the phrase you used when you said it meant more than 2 points. Love that.
Yeah. I think it. It's just something about these games, and you know what it's like. Rugby league's such a combative sport, and you need to give absolutely everything to win a game or to play well. you're in there, and it's a fight. It's hard,
and that feeling after,
yeah.
If you win, it means more.
Spot on.
If you lose, it guts you more.
Yeah. I think to get to that level of performance, you have to, in my experience anyway, you have to have that sort of personal approach. It's beyond a sporting competition. It's beyond a game of football.
And Manly and Melbourne, those years, they needed each other.
Spot on.
Like, it's a bit boring if it's just Manly.
Yeah.
A bit boring if it's just Melbourne.
Yeah,
you need each other to bring out the best and the worst in each other as well.
Yeah. That's the game generally. Like,
yeah.
Our chairman at the NRL speaks about this all the time, and so does our CEO, about the rivalry and the traditional rivalries and suburban stadiums. And this is what it's all about. It's rugby league. Yeah, sure. It's a sport. It's a game. It's a competitive competition. But just the nature of the sport. If you want to succeed, you have to go that little bit more. And I think whenever most rugby league players, when they step onto the field, it becomes a little bit personal as well. And there's a lot of emotion attached to every performance. And that's what I think makes the game so special.
Yeah.
You look at how much people want to win and play for their teammates and play for their club. It just sets up this spectacular atmosphere where you get a really good games of football.
And obviously that boil over and use the phrase, maybe you went too far with the famous / infamous Battle of Brookvale. And people still speak about it to this day. It's still referenced every time these two clubs play each other, and probably will for the foreseeable future. It will be this is what happened. And maybe we should or shouldn't promote our game on acts of foul play, but it speaks to a certain fan, and it like you say, the more than 2 points. But I want, knowing all this, you in your current role, if that was to happen today, it's hard to see the benefits.
Yeah. No, I think when you reflect on the history of our game, which goes back through many different generations, the game has been very different in the past than it is now. The game's continued to evolve and for the better. It's growing, and the expectations of the community shift. And as a result of that, there's some subtle changes and evolution of the game. So while people look back, like you said, in infamy or with a sense of sort of a positive memory about that experience, I think that's fine. That was the game back then. It was certainly wasn't tolerated, but there was probably what you would say would be there was a more of a risk back then of something like that happening than now.
Yeah.
And the game evolves, and it's evolved for the better. Back then, and you may have views on this as well. I don't think we were anywhere near as probably athletic or as skillful as some of the players we see now. So the games evolve, and you can look at the game now and think, wow, it's really evolved for the better. And it's a real quality spectacle now with some unbelievable athletes and unbelievable levels of professionalism as well, which you probably think that if you think about other contact or collision sports throughout the world, you'd say that they would probably had similar instances of things in the past, no matter how far you go back, and they're vastly different sports now.
It's funny, you think back to the Battle of Brookvale, and you can't have that happen every week. You can't have it happen every year. It's important because the game just disintegrates into acts of, pre-planned, premeditated, going back to worse than, some of those really dangerous eras. But then, you fast forward to last year's State of Origin and Olakau'atu and his corporate gear. It's in, and it's, the melee that happened. But you think, geez, it's like people were sort of trying to promote that as a bit of a battle, but it was nowhere near. That was a bit of an old school phrase, but a bit of handbags more than anything.
Yeah. And you got to respect your history, and these things happened, and people look back on that in so many different ways. But like I said, the game's evolved so much, and it's become so much bigger and so much more immersed in our community, and community's expectations have changed over the years. And one of the key challenges for sports is to remain relevant. We want people watching on TV. We want people engaging with articles and content, and we want people being involved in the game at the participation levels, whether that's playing or in a volunteer type capacity. So the game has to continually evolve to make sure it's resonating with a diverse section of the community, without being trying to be boastful by any means, but under the leadership of Peter V'landys, the chairman, and Andrew Abdo, the chief executive officer, I think we're doing a really good job of that. We respect the past and where the game's been and how we've got to the point now, but at the same time we're making subtle adjustments to make sure the game is really successful. We often talk at the NRL about that sports and entertainment experience. We want to really make sure it's a terrific sports and entertainment experience in Australia and the Pacific. We want that large connected sports community in Australia and the Pacific. And then about our administration, it's about being innovative, effective and efficient. And you think all these things are designed to make sure we maximise the potential of the game that I'm so passionate about, and I know you're so passionate about as well.
I'm going to jump ahead. I was going to save this for a little bit later. It's interesting talking about sort of community expectations, game at the community level, participation numbers, and there's strong evidence to suggest more engagement at community level, the more participants at tag, touch and full contact bring eyeballs and fans to our game. But then go to America with their main contact sport in NFL, like community and participation is not one of the drivers for NFL. It is almost separate in terms of, look at what these people can do. We're going to do something that you can't. We're going to showcase these phenomenal athletes because you can't and you don't have to. And that seems to be they are the most successful sporting code or sport in America. I've got some friends from America and they came over and they couldn't believe that people were playing rugby league for fun. They were genuinely like, why are adults playing this game? Like, so it exists over there, at college level. So schools, college, professional, there's no community game.
Yeah.
And they're not that they maybe don't value participation. But I don't know. I just find it interesting.
No,
and speaking to you from an administrative point of view,
it's a really interesting point. And you think about what may work over in America may not necessarily work over in Australia. We're different. We've got different culture and all those types of things. What works for us, I think, and gives you the greatest opportunity to grow the sport and to take it to another level is at both levels, whether that be at the top professional game, but then also equally at the community game. And in the community part of the game, I think you're right when you talk about potential, growing up, playing the sport, being involved in the sport when you're young, and then sort of becoming a lifelong supporter of that sport. There's a lot of evidence, like you said. But there's another really important element of it as well, which I've experienced, and you probably did as well, and this underpins some of the plans for the Australian Rugby League Commission in partnership with the Australian government to go into Papua New Guinea, is that rugby league can be life-changing. Whether or not you want to support the game moving forward, but certainly if I talk about my own experience, that it shaped me as a person. It built me. And this is from a young age. Not if you sort of disregard getting to the professional level, but teaching you all about skills in resilience and accountability and discipline. These things are so important, in my opinion. And you think involved in the game at such a young age is really
Makes you a better
helpful in your
person.
development. And then the other side to it as well, which is probably my point about Papua New Guinea, is that sport has this unbelievable power in terms of what it can achieve in a community generally. And you'll see that at the NRL with our different community programs that we have. We're using rugby league as a vehicle to have conversations to benefit our society and our community more broadly. And you think about Papua New Guinea and they're on their path to development. And you think about the potential of rugby league. It's the number one sport in their country. The potential of rugby league to go in there on a more consistent basis, well-resourced. There's outcomes for that society and that community could be, and the plan is to be outstanding.
Yeah, you 100% correct in what you're saying. Just sort of quickly reflecting and my community club, like the people involved, which are volunteers, weren't doing what they were doing to develop me into a player for St. Helens or to come over play for my country, play in the NRL. They were doing it to make me a better person, rather than instilling those qualities, like you mentioned, in terms of resilience, dealing with loss, graciously accepting victory, all these different things that sport can, help you with.
Yeah.
Experiencing people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures. Like we're very we have to celebrate a lot of different cultures with our game, and we learn and understand outside of our village, outside of our bubble.
That's a really good way to put it as well. It's and I mean I'm still involved now with my three sons, Will, Cruz, and Sam, who involved in sport. A couple of them play rugby league, and I'm so thrilled that they do. And I get involved as a coach at the Cromer Kingfishers, a club over in the Northern Beaches, and that's given my experience, which is very similar to yours. That's something I think it's yes, there's all the kids that turn up to play rugby league. That's have fun with your mates and play sport, but there's something a little bit deeper that I've learned over the years that you think there's an opportunity here to help these kids with not just sport, but with some of these things that are going to put them in good stead going forward. And we're both probably biased, but that's particularly one of the really great things about the rugby league community.
Mateship as well. It's huge on mateship. I want to take you back to those big years between the two football clubs of Manly and Melbourne. Played each other in back-to-back grand finals. We'll go with the 08 one first, 42-0. It's tight at half-time, but
40-0.
40-0.
42 sounds better.
Seems like you remember the score well. Talk to us about that day, and after the disappointment of 07 to face your rivals again. Hasler v Bellamy Part 2.
Yeah,
it's the sequel. I can't quite recall what the build-up was like here, and all the hype. I know what it's like now. I can only, I probably didn't capture the public as much as what it would have done now with all the media involved in the game. But what are your memories from that 08 game?
Oh, it makes me a bit emotional just sort of thinking back. you've been in some big games as well and won competitions. It's it was obviously the result was an unbelievable high, but yeah, thinking more deeply about the week and the game, we'd probably touch on this soon, but we'd been beaten quite convincingly the year before against Melbourne in the grand final, and that was our first time as a team into a grand final. And there's probably two ways you can go. You can dwell on it and focus on the negatives in losing the match, but pleasingly, the team we had, got stronger from the experience, and it made us train even harder, made us focus even harder, made us become tighter as a team. So, all the way through season 2008, there was just this. We just went to another level individually and as a team, and we just had this inner belief that we've been there now. We understand what it's all about. We know where we went wrong. We know the level we need to get to compete against the really good teams, and Melbourne's going to be right up there again, and we're not going to let this opportunity slip again. So there was that quiet confidence good teams have, but then we needed to combine that with a lot of hard work to get back to the grand final. And when we made the grand final, we were waiting to see. We were the first game, the first preliminary final. So we got together as a team the next day to watch the game that was going to decide who we were going to play against. And I still vividly remember that day. We were sort of one of the teammates' house, sort of watching it together, or having a bottle of water and getting ready for the next weekend. And there was just this. I don't think you could describe it as an arrogance, but there was just this belief we had amongst the team: we're not going to let this opportunity slip again. And so that was sort of what we took into the week. You have to, in grand final week, it's a different week. You have to embrace all the different things that happen. You can't resist it because I don't think that's helpful for your performance. So we embraced everything, the grand final breakfasts, and all the training sessions went up another level. We got to the game, and we just had this confidence that our team was pretty consistent from the year before. We'd done all our preparation. We were laser focused, and all it was up to then was to get out there and execute. And it was a battle. It was a battle. So we reflect on the scoreline being 40-0, but that first half was a grind the whole way through. And we were up at half time. We were only up 8-0. We didn't waver in our belief. We certainly weren't comfortable. Melbourne were playing some good footy. And we started that second half and just got straight back into where we need to be in that grind. They were a tremendous team. You look back on that side, they had some unbelievable athletes and players in their team. And obviously, my comments before about them being very well coached and great administrators down there. We knew we were in for a battle, and then there was a period there where all of a sudden everything just clicked for us. A couple of defensive mistakes from the Storm, a couple of really good individual efforts for us, and before we knew it, this scoreline had blown out.
Yeah.
There was 5 minutes to go, and we're all sort of on the field thinking, we can't believe this, we're actually going to win. And then I was out enjoying the last 5 minutes, and you'll remember that was Steve Menzies' last game for Manly. He equalled Terry Lamb's record for the highest number of NRL matches, being 349 on the day of the grand final. And then he managed to score, I think it was the last try of the game. So not only was it special for the Manly club, but it was so special for one of the legends of the club. Steve Menzies is held in such high regard by people on the Northern Beaches and Manly supporters. To then win and then enjoy everything that comes with that. And going back to what I said before about the rugby league is so important to the fabric of the community. I remember the celebrations and us going down Manly Corso in golf carts. This is on like a Monday or a Tuesday. I can't remember exactly what day it was. And it was like trying to find your way through a crowded stadium. Like, there were people everywhere. Everyone had come out of it. They weren't going to miss the opportunity to see their players and the emotion that was on people's faces of all ages. Whether it was a young kid right up to people my age and people I've been to school with and people my parents' age and even older than that. Tears in their eyes, grown men and grown women, and just what it means to the community. It's So I reflect back on that, and you probably tell I probably get a little bit dramatic, but it's such a special memory. But yeah, we're going to now go back to 2007 when it was all real negative.
Well, I want to ask you about maybe not going back to the day itself, but the day or the weeks after the news breaking of Melbourne being stripped of their 2007 Premiership, and it affected two clubs in particular, and that's yourselves and Parramatta. Parramatta, arguably more so because they didn't get that retribution. When we saw Melbourne come out in a united front, how did the Manly group digest that news?
Oh, I think it was sort of surprising, I guess. Were there feelings of sort of dissatisfaction or something along those lines? You probably think, yeah, there's probably an element of that, but you know what it's like when you're in these teams. You need to focus. You need to focus on yourselves and doing the best thing you guys can do as a team. You can't focus too much on the opposition, and while there might have been an element of dissatisfaction, you think on the day there was 17 players playing for the Melbourne Storm. There were 17 players playing for us, and I know that's probably a naive comment because you talk about the importance of things like a salary cap, and it's part of my role at the NRL now is to oversee the NRL salary cap, which is it's a crucial instrument for the game in creating that competitive competition. But if you think back, if I put the hat on as a player for Manly at the time, I don't think there was a great deal of bitterness about it. They beat us on the day. They were by and away the best team throughout the year. History is what it is, but maybe I would be a little bit different if I was a Parramatta player, like you said. We were able to, before this news broke, we were able to come back and win in 2008.
Yeah, so you beat this team that effectively cheated the salary cap. So I guess maybe you look back and go, well, it's even greater accomplishment.
Yeah, I think that probably mitigated the feelings a lot. That and did it even make our 2008 Premiership even more special?
Yeah.
I don't think I can't recall us sort of having any discussions at a team. And I certainly remember it was all just about us. Well, okay. But having said that, the retribution thing the following year probably played a big part in that.
Yeah, I just sort of wondered if maybe, I said back in those days, the idea of going back to back was so foreign. And
yeah.
Like it hadn't been done for so long then. Obviously, we've seen the Roosters do it. We've seen Penrith do 4 in a row and counting. Yeah. But back then it was, been a long time between drinks for back to back.
Yeah, I never really think back about the back-to-back bit, but what I do think back, and this is probably consistent with what I said about thinking about our team, was that I think back through that period, from probably 2007, probably up until I retired in 2014, and we won another one in 11. But if I think back in that period, rather than thinking about back-to-back, I probably think back and think, and I know a couple of my teammates from that period think the same thing. Think, I reckon we had another one or two. Yeah. And this might sound arrogant, but given the team we had and the confidence we had and the experience we had, I reckon we let a few opportunities slip that we could have won one or two more. I know that sounds arrogant, but that was a belief we had as a team.
I think that's quite a common feeling amongst successful teams, that they probably didn't quite squeeze as much of the juice as they should have.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to know what success does to people. That's why I think Penrith's accomplishments so far are, just difficult to fathom, because we anyone that's been part of success knows that motivation, unconsciously does suffer.
Yeah.
And you look, every player, you speak to people at South Sydney in 14, they're still pissed off about losing to you guys in 13. They're still pissed off at that game.
Yeah. In the prelim.
In the prelim, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That got you to the GF against the Roosters.
Yes.
The South Sydney players look back at that and go,
yeah,
that was our year. We should have gone back to back.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And that's probably, like you said, it probably makes what Penrith are doing now even more special. Because, you know, when you break it down, it does come down to, it's a bit of a cliche in the game now, but it does come down to those moments in the game. And you think, you know, those big games where you might have been a step off the pace or you didn't execute right at that right time, and that in hindsight that ended up being a really pivotal part of the game. And you think about Penrith, you know, those pivotal moments they've had over 4 years, and the ones that matter, those moments that matter, they've grabbed them.
Yeah,
and they've grabbed them quite convincingly. So, yeah, the period of success the Panthers have had, you just have to take your hat off to them. They've obviously got terrific players on the field. They execute their game plan. They've got everything in order. Not that I know intimately, but it appears they have anything in order off the field. Running a really strong pathway system, high performance program, and getting their results. So Penrith fans are very happy at the moment.
They sure are. You mentioned 2011, winning another premiership. The aftermath of that. I was at home in England watching it all unfold and finding out I'd already signed for the Bulldogs. No coach. And then...
Oh, so 12 was your first year?
12 was my first year. So I'm watching this unfold going, oh, this is great. I get this premiership winning coach. How good's this? Oh, he's coming in 13. Oh, no, he's not. He's coming in 12. But for you and your club, it must have been a very different emotion.
Yeah, it was very shocking, and sort of a sense that it was unreal, because you know what it takes to win win premierships. It's like I said before about the level of performance you have to get to play against the Melbourne Storm and beat the Melbourne Storm. You need to be doing a whole lot of things right, and that's on the field and it's also off the field. And so you think in 2011, like we were clicking really well. We had everything in order. We had a really good side. We were executing really well. And it creates this really deep connection amongst teammates and coaching staff and support staff. And we used to use a phrase, which I think a number of teams possibly did, but we were sort of all in. We were all in, focused on winning the competition. An arrogant inner belief that that's what we're going to do, and that permeated the whole club. So then, we won the competition. I didn't play. I'd torn my pec earlier in the season, playing against Jared Hargraves, another crazy front rower that I locked horns with from time to time. Terrific guy, Jared. Had a terrific career, but I tore my pec and I was wrestling or getting tackled by him. I can't remember. So I missed the 2011 grand final. But to go back to the point, still intimately involved. I was co-captain of the club at that stage, and we celebrated as you celebrate winning the premiership. It was terrific in the community again, and then we got pulled aside. We're going to our presentation night on the Friday. Had been organised. So we won the competition on the Sunday, and then going to the presentation night on the Friday, and we've all arrived after having a terrific week with our partners and wives, and we were going to have a terrific night, and then we were required, all the players and staff were required to sort of go into a room before we went in the main ballroom where the presentation was going to be, and the partners weren't invited in. I thought, oh, geez, this is a bit weird. I don't know if we're having a full debriefing on the game, just before the presentation night, because it feels a bit awkward. Everyone's getting dressed up and heading with the partner to the presentation, and then sort of telling them all just sort of wait outside. I've got to go have a meeting. But anyway, and that was the meeting where Des had revealed that he wasn't going to coach the club anymore. well, at that stage, because he ultimately did come back to the club. But it was such a surprise, and it was obviously a bit deflating because I've spoken about the relationship you build up with the coach, and everybody of that team had such a strong relationship with the coach, and we just achieved phenomenal success on another competition within a relatively short period of time. To then hear that news and think, it was sort of very deflating. But at the end of the day, this is a professional game. We have to all appreciate that. It's people's livelihoods, and they need to make the best decisions for themselves and their families. It's the reality of the modern game. So, I've come to accept that. But at the time, it was
difficult to accept.
It was very difficult for everybody.
Yeah, and you're talking about it there almost as if you're an outsider looking in. You're going, well, it's just part of the game, but it's more. It's a person who you're deeply connected to, and the bonds that I created, and like you say, if you were at the Bulldogs, you would have been delighted.
Yes,
but no, they're our enemy. Like why? We know that he's going to make them better. Yeah, and this is going to be a new rival.
Yeah. And that's exactly what played out. I mean, then we're playing against the Bulldogs the next year and the following years, and Des is the coach. And like I was saying about Melbourne, that it probably started that for Manly and the Bulldogs, that you go to the next level, and then you and I are getting stuck into each other, all this type of stuff. That's what you need. That's what it sort of takes it to the next, which is great for the game. You think about the theatre that it creates,
that's
the
it.
tension, and animosity.
Well, there's a few times in sports I sort of use this analogy, and it's only very rare, but I believe it to be true. So, if me and you are in a Hollywood director's office, and we script that Manly win the comp in this competition called the NRL, and then the week after their coach leaves this Premiership winning team, a team that he's played for, he's been the conditioner for, he's the head coach for, he's had it's his second time winning a Premiership, and then we find out he's been having these secret meetings with a rival. If we're in that Hollywood office, we go, come on, it's a bit too far-fetched.
They won't believe it.
No. The public aren't going to buy this. It's too cheesy. It just, no. We're not. We're going to have to take some parts out.
That's a tremendous way to put it. But and I think that's one of the great things about our game. And I said it before, and I think it resonated with you. But the theatre of the game is what resonates most with the fans. It is about what's happening on the field, and you would say first and foremost, but there's these other stories that are happening in the
subplots
that are so juicy, and they're not good enough for a Hollywood movie, or they can't make the grade for a reality TV show. But, and it just captures people's attention, and it seems to bring the rugby league fans and the community even closer. But you have to zoom out, and I think look at it from that perspective to be at ease with it all. Yeah. But when you're a character in one of these movies, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to accept from time to time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've seen The Usual Suspects. The first time you watch it, and you're like, that's Kaiser Soze. Oh no, didn't see that coming. Like this, he's the villain, the hero. Des, he's the hero, and then all of a sudden we realise, he's the Bond villain. Like,
but then he comes back to be the hero,
and then he
again.
comes back to couldn't script it. That's it. That's the sequel. Yeah. You spoke about being in this room. I can only imagine the immediate pop.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're spot on. It was sort of like, my recollection is that sort of looking around at other team members and looking at Des.
Did you think it was a joke?
Yeah,
because, you can imagine Des doing this as a joke.
Well, particularly off the back of the week,
Yeah.
just had like it's all so positive and jovial and plenty of laughs, plenty of telling stories and things, and you sort of think, is this some type of continuation of that? Then Des because Des is a practical joker.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it wasn't. But yeah, I remember us all looking around and thinking, I can't. Like, what did he just say? And anyway, then going, moving from that room to then
trying to celebrate with sponsors, your partners, everybody that's involved in the club, and it's this huge event. You couldn't buy a ticket to get into the Manly presentation that year. It would have been chock-a-block.
Yeah,
and then hang on, why are the players all walking in like they've why the long face? Come on.
I think when we came out of that room, I think there was a photographer there that wanted to get a picture of the team as we're making our way down these like palatial sort of stairs, and like all the players and staff are sort of on these palatial stairs in this facility where we had the presentation. And you see that photo now. You look at that photo, and it's like one of those rugby league photos you do when you're 10 or 15 years of age, where you try and look real tough.
Yeah,
it's like that. We'd won the competition like on the Sunday. Not one person's smiling. Everyone's just got this like blank look on their face. And no doubt when we went into the room and during the presentation, no doubt all the fans were sort of looking around at all the players, thinking, why aren't they a bit happier? They just won the comp.
Were you told to keep this to yourself?
Oh, I can't remember.
You can't remember, yeah.
I can't remember. I've got a feeling, and maybe this is incorrect, but I've got a feeling that Des wanted to tell the team first, and as difficult that would have been for him, he told us in that room, and then I've got a feeling that then we went into the presentation, and then throughout the presentation, I think it was also everybody else was sort of informed.
And news travels
That's my
fast. Like
recollection.
it'd be impossible to keep that in.
Yeah.
Like it really would.
That's my recollection. So I think, I think the fans probably, and all the partners and everybody else that are there sort of celebrating the premiership, they soon realised why everyone was not in such a jovial mood as you would have thought.
Yeah, it'd be a bizarre time.
It was.
I can imagine waking up the next day and what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, I guess probably the question I'm looking to ask, did it overshadow your achievements?
Oh, I don't think it overshadowed. Like, we're still very, very proud of what we've achieved. It was just this.
Oh, but I mean, in that moment, was it difficult to separate the bad news from the fact that you've just won it?
Yeah, I think, you're probably right, but, to take light of the situation is probably good, because we've been celebrating for 5 days until we got that news. So we probably needed to turn the volume down a bit, so to speak. But I think you're right. I mean, I think if I can sort of speak on behalf of the collective, is you could probably say that the mood of all the players and the team generally was, it went from one of celebration and joy to then the following day starting to think about the realities of Des's news and that he was leaving us, and then it was also announced, I'm pretty sure, at the same time that Jeff Tuvey was going to be Des's successor. So I think it was then said, okay, well, we're starting to think about Tuvey being the head coach and what may change, and what pre-season start looks like. So I think you're right. There's probably a line in the sand. I think you've gone from being in celebration mood from winning the grand final to then, turning the volume down a bit and starting to think probably more about business and what this means for the club moving forward.
And you obviously still had an incredibly strong roster. Des comes to the Dogs. We play Manly. You used a phrase before about more than 2 points. Did it feel different?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. I can't remember if we played you guys out.
I think it was at Brookvale.
Brookvale, yeah.
I can remember it feeling different.
Yeah.
Like the atmosphere was just
There's a lot of
an atmosphere that only sport can provide.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, like you couldn't script it any better.
No.
Like, then everyone turns up to Brookvale and Brookvale's like sold out. It's heaving.
You got to go through that little
all this emotion.
Almost, it's not a cage, but it's like a gate, and there was security was ramped up. Like the bus pulls in, like
and the fans used to bang the perspex, so there's this enormous roar. So the stage was just set for the two teams to perform, and I got a feeling you guys might have got us that night.
No, I think you won that one, and then we beat you in at Homebush later on from memory.
Yeah,
from memory.
And it was. You think back and and you think that this rugby league's got so much emotion in it, which creates these great spectacles and all these subplots, like we said. That set up a decent rivalry for us for the next couple of years.
Well, and even thinking back, like the Dogs seem to be linked with every Manly player that was off contract.
Yes.
I can only imagine what it's like being in that dressing room, being like, you are not going with him. Like, and even almost, personal battle from the club to be like, we can't let someone else go.
Yeah.
Like, and just the brilliance and like you say, the theatre of it all.
Yeah.
We played each other in our finals game.
Yes.
I look back at this clip and it gets, the phrase gets mentioned to me and I cringe. Run again, son.
Believe it or not, it gets mentioned to me quite often as well. You know what cuts most is when my sons mention it to me. There's a couple of clips online. There's not many of my highlights, but there's one about me getting absolutely poleaxed by Adrian Morley, and the other one is of you telling me to run it again, son.
What are you thinking? Because I don't know what I was thinking, but what, like, or did it not? Did it even resonate? Because it probably shit gets said all the time on the field, like,
yeah.
And I don't know, what was it like for you to hear this ginger Englishman sort of like, because we were going at there was so much tension in that game.
There was. Yeah.
Hasler's first year at the Dogs, he's catapulted us to the top of the table.
Yeah.
1v4. First week of playoffs. It's on. Like both of us had a point to prove. We had a point to prove that we belonged. You had a point to prove to, hey, Des, look what you missed. Look, take a look at what you could have won.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, could have kept hold of.
Yeah.
It's like the ex-girlfriend.
It was.
Bouncing into the club.
I love your analogy. They're the best.
Run again, babe.
Oh, dear. Yeah, because there was. I remember. I see if you remember it the same way. I might have elaborated a little bit, so you might have to.
Oh, that's all right, mate. Yeah. You go.
There's obviously the front row position. Yeah, you're combative, and you got to sort of stamp your authority on the game. You're trying to do that. I'm trying to do that. So you're going at each other. I think it was the opening, 10, 20 minutes of the game. So. Two good Swatty sides are going at each other. Front row is going at each other. Like, great stuff. Everybody loves it. And so there's a bit of confrontation there. And I think it elevates a little bit. Maybe there was a high tackle or something like that. And then I remember you tackling me, and then it's starting to drive me back a little bit. And so that irked me. I think, man, he's getting me. And then I think we fell to the ground, and there's a bit of niggle. And I remember... you yelling really loudly, and you're probably like yelling just because you drove me back, and your mouth was so close to my ear because you're really rubbing it in that my ear instantly started ringing. so that got me worked up. So then I worked up, and then I think we had, as you do back in those days, you have a push and a shove, and threaten to go further, but invariably you never really do. And then, then you dropped that clanger. That was the best.
Like genuinely look back and think, who is that person?
As I was saying, it's all the front rowers generally all the same. You're different people off the field than you are on the field, and you go to that level when you're on the field, and it was great. Like you think back and you think, when you're long retired now, you think back and you think, the hair standing up on the back of your neck when you're playing those games, and
it means everything.
Like,
It means so much. In just consumes you. Like you live. We lived in a bubble where that was the only thing that mattered.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but getting to that level of like anxiety and nerves, and competitiveness and battle,
and not wanting to let people down.
Yeah,
just
you never really get to that level. When you're not playing footy,
it's just not the same.
So you think back, and you think, oh wow, that was wild, but how good's that?
Your sons, they've obviously not researched you well enough, because I researched you, and Jason King, the try that needs to be seen to be believed, talking about Hollywood, off the kickoff, burst through, 2-on-1 with the fullback, you pass the Menzies, he gets chased down, you're jogging alongside him, you get the ball, and you start and finish a 100-metre try. Bravo. Bravo.
Yeah.
Like that is, if you're my dad, that's what I'm looking at. Dad, tell me how you did this.
Yeah, that one doesn't really come up.
No.
It's all about
I think you need to
enjoy that more, I think.
Fans of the buy round, let's switch the algorithm. All start clicking on Jason King's, the try that needs to be seen to be believed. And let's check. This could be the turning point in history.
Oh, it's one of the best trivia questions going around.
I think you're going to say it's one of the best tries you ever see. It's one of the best
if I
tries you are ever likely to see.
It actually won, believe it or not, try of the year in 2002.
And so it should have done.
I remember sitting on the couch because it was at the Dally M Awards, and Peter Sterling, and I'm a massive fan of the game. But we just like you are watching the Dally M Awards on TV in 2002, and Peter Sterling, I think he was working for Fox at that time, and he announces the try of the year for the 2002 season, and awards it to me. I'm sitting on the couch at home. I'm like, Peter Sterling just mentioned my name, let alone just said that I got try of the year.
Did you get a trophy for it?
I don't think I ever did.
Oh,
I don't think I.
You know some people that can.
Yeah, maybe I should bring that up.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Just try get a trophy.
Put that on the agenda.
Yeah. Was it Craig Gower that missed out on the?
That was the following year. That was the following year.
Yeah. And
but
they're
similar.
If we want justice for Gower, justice for King. So,
but so there's a bit of trivia, but that was I think we were going all right at the time. Like I think we had the opposition beat. We were up by 20 points or something like that. So I picked out the halfback when I was, as you do, to try and preserve the body a little bit, as opposed to run against the front row. You try and run where you might be able to get a fast play the ball and not cop as big a whack. And I went through the halfback, and then Ashley Graham was the fullback for the Raiders. I thought, I was just thinking to myself, draw and pass, thinking all those years I've practiced that 2-on-1 draw and pass. Don't butcher this up. Don't butcher this up. And Beaver was, legend of the club, was in support of pass it to Beaver. And Beaver was an unbelievable athlete. He was big, he could hit like an axe, and he was lightning quick. So I passed it to Beaver and thought, game over, Beaver's going to score this, it's going to be great. I played a role in this try, I made a break off the kickoff. So I'm just running behind Beaver, more just getting prepared to sort of jump on him and celebrate the try. But Ashley Graham is a real speedster. So he's ended up mowing down Beaver, and Beaver's sort of flicked it back to me, and I ended up getting the ball back and then sort of falling over the line. And I've looked at the footage, and all those teammates from back in the day, just as a kid that I only played, I think at that stage I only played about 10 first grade games or something. I think,
oh really?
Yeah, how good is this? Yeah, how good is this? But I never looked like doing it again, and I never looked like getting anywhere close to Steve Menzies when he made a break.
I reckon that's one and done.
It was one and done.
It's like a Mount Everest. You don't go twice.
Yeah.
Once you've been to the moon, Neil Armstrong didn't need to go back. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt. You mate,
spot on.
Yeah,
spot on.
yeah. Keep that in.
I'll
keep
go
that
back
in
to being a front row.
Yeah.
None of those flash stuff.
No. We've spoke a lot about your career as a player, but I'm conscious of the time. But I'm really interested to hear about your role now. So, General Manager of Legal, Integrity and Risk. Are we talking purely on field only, or is that off field, or a combination of the two?
Yeah, it's more a combination of the two. So, before I tackle that, I'll probably just say that I've been, incredibly lucky. Not only to have a first grade career and play for the team that I supported as a youngster, but then once I retired, I'd done a little bit of study and was able to transition into head office and start working at the NRL, and I jumped into the legal team to start with. I then went into the commercial team with the current CEO, Andrew Abdo. Spent a number of years with Graham Annesley in the football department, which was terrific. So the reason for saying that is just a game that I fell in love with as a kid, still being able to be involved and contribute and have an impact and work for the governing body of the game is just, it's just been so special as an experience, and I'm so fortunate for that. So now I found my way into a role, that you mentioned, sitting on the leadership team at the NRL, which is, is a terrific honour. Working with the Commission on all the different initiatives and the direction the Commission is taking the game is really exciting, and I get to play a small part in that as a member of management. And the roles, it's quite diverse. It covers the legal function for the NRL and sort of across the game.
So when we talk about legal, like I know it's quite a broad term, but what needs to be addressed there?
Yeah, so there's a range of different things. The NRL is a sport, as we all know, but it's also a medium to large size corporation. Yeah. Not for profit entity, but it's got has a lot of commercial deals. It has a lot of agreements in place with a whole range of different stakeholders, whether that's the clubs or the state leagues. There's rules in place, that set up the contracting framework for the game. There's rules in place about the salary cap. There's rules in place about the operations of the competition itself. There's rules in place around the code of conduct, performance-enhancing drugs. And so the legal team at the NRL is sort of overseeing a diverse spectrum of sort of sports law type issues. And we're very fortunate to have a number of really experienced and really efficient and effective lawyers in the team that cover like a wide breadth of different sort of subject matter, and essentially providing legal services and support to the NRL to support all of its operations.
Because there's employment law as well, which is slightly different to... So our employment law would be slightly different to those in most other industries. Is that correct?
Yeah, the employment law of the land still applies to the NRL.
Does it?
But there are some nuances.
Yes. Yeah. So what in terms of when you're dealing with that, which comes first?
Oh, the law of the land is...
The law of the land.
Yeah, is first and foremost. So, the NRL doesn't have any exemption from complying with the law, whether that's sort of the common law, which is the law from the courts, or whether that's law you'll find in legislation. That all sits up there as a law, and the NRL is going to fall in underneath that. We need to make sure we comply with the law. But there's a few nuances to how the contracting model of the NRL is structured. And sports are a little bit similar in this regard. So when I sort of talk about sports law, we have to be across the broader employment law considerations, but then we need to work out and advise on how we interpret all of that and apply it to professional sport.
Yeah, because if you've been in the game, if you're a player, you can't just go on long service leave.
That's right.
And people are entitled to that.
Spot on. But we need to make sure, entitlements that workers have under legislation or the common law are still applied in a rugby league context. And you will know about discussions we have with the Rugby League Players Association, the RLPA, about a collective bargaining agreement. The collective bargaining agreement essentially is setting up the terms and conditions that the players are engaged by the clubs, and then what is the role of the NRL in the game as well when it comes to those relationships. So without trying to get into too much detail, the players are employees of the clubs are the employer, but then there's a registration requirement for every player with the NRL, which sets up this sort of contractual relationship with the NRL and allows us to govern the sport. And similar type of relationships are put in place with clubs in terms of license agreements and funding agreements to give effect to the whole sort of contractual framework which sort of brings the game together.
One of the things that really intrigued me in your role is the word risk.
Yeah.
And our appetite for risk is often individual, often set by the environment that we surround ourselves in. What does it mean for you?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Risk is a very broad concept, particularly when you apply it to a rugby league environment or a professional sport. It can cover many facets. Like I said, you think about the NRL as a corporate entity. All elements of risk that apply to other corporate entities apply to the NRL. So there's considerations around that, which you probably refer to as sort of off-field risk,
like financial risk.
Yeah, there's financial, there's reputational. We put lots of things that our policies, non-on-field policies that are designed to address. And you think about things that we go in the rugby league context, community levels of the game and how we're establishing a safe and welcoming environment and things along those lines. So there's a whole range of different types of risk, which you broadly sort of call sort of enterprise risk, which is common across all different organisations. But then you're going to get your industry-specific risk, which is probably where you start getting to on-field and the rules of the game. And then when we talk about risk, this all flows down obviously from the commission. There's a number of different things we take into account when thinking about how we address this risk, and there's many different types. I know you're passionate about particular types of risk and players stepping on the field, and there's the role that we try to play is to really become well informed on what the risk is. So how can we inform ourselves, whether it's at the commission level, which obviously comes first and foremost, or cascading below that? How can we inform ourselves and understand the risk as best we can? So
you as the commission or the athletes that are going to...
I'll get to the athletes.
Okay.
I'll get to the athletes. So from a governing body perspective, it's administrators of the game. How can we understand all different types of risk as best we can? So, engaging with experts as we need to. You think about doctors and researchers, people that are well regarded in the industry. So there's levels of collaboration to sort of understand these risks as best we possibly can. So is
that to protect the game from, or individuals within the game from being pursued in the courts?
I think the motivation would be, from a lot of different perspectives. I think that's obviously an issue. You don't want to establish an environment where it has a whole heap of risk, because it can be dangerous, can lead to adverse outcomes. Yeah. So you do it for a whole range of different reasons. But it takes me to my second point, which is then, okay, now you understand the risk really well. What are you going to put in place as an attempt to reduce that risk? And here's where you start talking about your rules or your policies
Yeah.
or your procedures or protocols. And so and this is where it links in with what I said before about the NRL rules and people needing to comply with the rules, because what you're doing then is you're giving effect to these risks by adapting your rules to try and reduce that risk. And then the third point is then, okay, well, what are we going to do as a game to then make sure people are complying with that risk? Complying with those
rules
and procedures and processes.
And I guess one of the difficult aspects of your role is you'd know that people are going to try and exploit those rules to better their chances of success. Like every time a new rule comes in, coaches instantly go, how can I get this to work to my advantage?
Yeah, and we're not naive. We know, like, we operate in a very competitive environment. You talk about clubs, and we've both been at clubs for a long period of time. Like, there's a relentless pursuit to win.
And it'll be almost anything. And I had that attitude of almost anything. Some go, absolutely anything.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably where we have to put on the hat as a regulator, and this goes exactly to the point about how do we put measures in place to ensure there's going to be compliance with these rules that we've established, and the Commission's put these rules in place for very legitimate reasons. So how do we ensure compliance? And that's probably where the integrity side of my role comes in, and you will see from time to time there's different matters that arise in the game, whether it's on field or off field, that need to be addressed through the mechanism of the rules. The final point, which is probably the most important point, is how do you educate people, players, club officials, fans, anybody that sort of touches the game about these risks? So this is where the education bit comes in. I know you're passionate about this piece.
Well, also, it's important to educate them on the long-term consequences or the potential long-term consequences, because the risk involved in something like driving a vehicle is only going to manifest in the short term or the immediate if it goes wrong.
Debatable.
Well, so if I'm driving, I like to drive my car home. If I'm in an accident, it's short. If I speed, it's short term. It's not going to catch up with me in 10, 30 years' time.
Yeah, you hope not.
But what's the point I'm probably getting at is, like, it's difficult. It must be difficult to educate people on long-term risks, because naturally as human beings, like, that's why people smoke. It's why people take alcohol, don't look after themselves in terms of their diet, exercise, mental health. That's later's problem. Instant gratification.
And that's probably that you've hit the nail on the head. That's sort of the key part is with the education of the risk. What is the game aware of? How can it be at the front of understanding the most about these particular issues, that it can then put methods in place to address it, ensure compliance, but then go out to the people that matter most. Often we're referring mostly to players here, and give them this information so they're well aware of the risks. And sport in general over the years is becoming much, much better. What we do now is really, really good in terms of different mechanisms and stakeholders we use to try and provide that education, so people are well informed of the potential consequences of engaging in this activity. The same way, to use your analogy, the same way as when you get behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, or whether you want to jump in a boat, or whether you want to engage in other types of sport,
swim with sharks,
all that type of stuff,
free climb a mountain,
spot on,
base jump, whatever it is.
The key bit is making sure people are well aware, and everyone's got individual liberty to make the decision.
See,
what you can't have is a situation where those four things that I just mentioned aren't in place. So we turn our mind as best we can, and it's high on the radar when it comes to a whole range of different risks. To how can we make sure we are doing as best and as reasonably possible? That doesn't really make sense. So how are we doing the best we possibly can and doing what's reasonable and appropriate to deal with that potential situation?
See, I really wrestle with this because I didn't need a lawyer or a doctor to tell me what I was doing came with danger. In fact, I've said this before, I was attracted to the danger. I don't want to play. I don't want to engage in safe activities, especially as a teenager. I needed the risk to make it work. Otherwise, there was no attraction to me, and I go in a different direction, whatever that may be, whether it's other sporting endeavours or, quite a lot of the time with especially young men, it's criminal activity to engage in that risk, the elevation of status. So I understand why, as a major sporting code, we need these practices in place. But part of me is just like, tell each player to take some time to think and take responsibility for their actions, and provide a framework of, and some structure around what's acceptable, what's not, rules of the game, high contact, etc. But I think they need, like, people have an appetite for risk. Otherwise, it just becomes.
Yeah,
do you understand the point I'm trying to make?
Yeah,
It's like,
I think I
knew as a 19-year-old this was risky. I probably didn't think about it enough. But then towards my sort of mid to late 20s, I accepted the fact that this sporting endeavour was going to reduce my health and life expectancy. But there'd be elements of it that would also increase it.
Yeah, in my personal experience is probably not too different to yours. But what I would say in response is that there are going to be some players like us that probably have that view, that I don't need somebody to necessarily, whether it's we come up with a whole range of different ways to sort of try and get this message across. Certainly not me, as a lawyer, sort of standing in front. Which, how can we get this message across? This is where the educators come in the best possible way, so this message resonates. So, and that can be a whole range of different stakeholders, whether it's the RLPA, whether it's your teammates, whether it's your coach, whether it's your CEO, whether it's somebody in the NRL. Like, get the message across in the most appropriate forum. But there are going to be some people that are like you and me, but there may be some people that are not, and they may be a little bit unsure. And so what the league thinks, and this is driven like the commission, like I said, is that are we doing everything we can as a governing body and responsible for the administration of the game in Australia? Are we doing everything we can to educate or address? So if we took the view that everybody is like you and I would question. We're sort of working on an assumption then that everybody's like you and I. Whereas I'd say that if the game thinks about this as the governing body, are we doing everything that we think we should? Are we doing everything that we can to sort of address this? You come up with the view that you think, there's probably something else we could do. Let's really make sure. Let's really make sure through a whole different mechanisms and forums that people are given the opportunity, to the extent they want to hear this information, they're given plenty of opportunity to hear it.
Is mandatory training part of the protocol, and further to that, is it your standard contract model? Is this going to be part of that, where it's almost a waiver?
Yeah, there's so much complexity with discussions about the law and how it applies to these types of situations that we're sort of referencing. But if you go back to training and education, that's and whether it's mandatory, and there are elements that are mandatory, and our focus is on making sure those materials are as best they possibly can. If you think about those first 3 points, and it's not just the NRL. I mean, everybody's got a strong interest in these types of things, particularly clubs, and obviously chief medical officers who have the most contact with individual players. And how as a group can you make sure the training is as best it possibly can be to help and inform and mitigate the risk. Talking about mandatory trade, there's things in our medical officers handbook that the chief medical officers at clubs are required to do, and this is all informed by best practice and other doctors and the views of the commission. To then, it's a requirement to do that because we're participating in this particular sport, and we think this is setting up the best possible environment to reduce the risk that comes with participating in a collision sport like rugby league. And we're certainly not the only ones. Like you look at across the game, across sport, there's a lot of collision sports throughout the world, and they all go through similar type of thinking to us. And some sports are like ours, which are collision based. Some are probably you would classify being as probably more sort of physical than ours. You think about sort of combat sports and things like that. Some less so. Think about sort of football or soccer, but they still have similar types of risks. You think about head injuries that potentially may arise as a result of hitting a soccer ball and things like that. So everyone's thinking of the similar ways, but those 4 points that I sort of outlined, that's how we sort of challenge ourselves to try and make sure we're staying ahead of the game and addressing those things that we have to.
I guess there's a couple of recent examples of where sports have been in the headlines, especially in the UK. I've been reading recently around the class action, and from rugby league players aging from I think 26 to 80 odd for a number of years, and one of the things highlighted, and I guess to the general population they would be surprised to hear this, but I guess from my experience it came with the territory about one of the bullet points they make in the argument to the court, and I am sort of paraphrasing here, but it's around playing with a broken nose. And a number of players complained after the fact, however many years later, that I continued to play with a broken nose. Now, I look at that and go, what do you want, mate? Do you want a round of applause? You want me to shake your hand? Like, well done. You played with a broken nose. So what? Yeah. Give yourself a pat on the back, mate. You know who cares about that? No one. Your teammates did at the time, but you know what? You were compensated financially, had a great life. Whatever. For me, it really irks me, and I'm interested because I'm worried about where the game society goes. We've got one of the clubs I'm involved with, the Bulldogs, and they're facing this court case where a former employee is sort of challenging the workplace environment, and I understand it is important, but then sport's a little bit different. If you broke your nose going to work now, you go home and get it fixed. But when you were playing, I'm going to assume, Jason, that you would have continued on.
Yeah. I mean, I won't comment on those sort of particular sort of legal matters that you've sort of referenced, but if I talk about my own experience when I was playing, and the nature of our sport is that there, from time to time, particularly in the professional ranks, more than when you're just participating at a junior level, but things may happen, like you may break your nose, or you may get stitches on your eyebrow, or you may break a finger, or things like this, and I mean, certainly my experience has always been that there's been a very good doctor at the club who has taken care of me and provided me advice, taken me to get scans of any of these sort of ailments, and then informed me of potential consequences if I was to continue to keep playing. And then on balance, it was genuinely my decision. You'd talk to your coach, you'd talk to the doctor, talk to everyone else, physiotherapy in some instances, to then make the decision whether you were going to then step on the field again. And generally, if it was one of those sort of minor type injuries, you would, minor as in I considered it minor. Then I was happy to take the field, and whatever came of that was effectively I was comfortable with. On the other hand, there were some injuries where you had sustained an injury, and the medical advice would be you shouldn't play. And as much as that's disheartening, that was the medical advice, and essentially you're some way, I guess, confirming that I'm not going to play because the medical advice is telling me that I shouldn't. But I mean, if it gets into areas where there's coercion to play or ramifications of not playing and things like that.
So it
where people
not blackmail but threatening, like if you don't play, you can't. Yeah.
And I'm certainly not witnessing these types of things in my role. I'm not aware of it. I know, safe to say you're not aware of it either. But that's a different question.
Yes, yeah. Probably thinking the environments I was in, I never witnessed it going too far or being pushed to that extreme. But I can remember I had a collision with a teammate in my penultimate game for St Helens in 2020, the last game being the grand final. Broke my nose, big cut across the eye, and like, Doc, what are we going to do about this? Broken nose. It's like, look, I'll tell you what works, but I know you're not going to listen because you're going to play next week. Like, Doc, tell me what I need to know, and I'll see you next week. Sweet, all good.
And there's some areas where the game's thought it's appropriate to intervene, and you think about potential head injuries and concussion and things like this, where the game has felt it's appropriate to put interventions in place to prevent a player from being autonomous in making those decisions. So, for example, if their injury surveillance bunker detects or forms a view, there's a suspicious of a concussion, and they form the view on for medical reasons and based on all medical research that you've showed a symptom or a sign of a potential concussion, then you're required to come from the field. Whether or not that player, and you'll see it from time to time, player, competitive beasts, don't want to leave the field.
I would not have. I don't think that came in while I was playing, but I can remember telling physios where to go when they thought I needed to come off.
Yeah, and the language sometimes thrown around these days is protecting the players from themselves, because to be at this level, you have to be an intense competitor. You have to be ferocious. You've got to fight for every inch. You don't want to let anybody down. You don't want your teammates down. You don't want to let the fans down. You want to win. So there's environments where the game thinks, and particularly when it's an issue that involves the head, the game's taken a view based on a medical advice that in these particular circumstances, it's appropriate for the game to intervene. And it doesn't intervene often in anything else. So it does intervene in many other areas. I mean, I think another area that I can sort of comes to mind is if you have a big cut on your head and there's blood or something, you have to go off to get that attended to. But probably differing reasons. But the game doesn't interfere in too many areas, but there's some where it identifies, we've done our analysis on the risk, we've done our research, we're informed by experts, and we think this is an appropriate response.
The NRL is absolutely flying at the moment. Record numbers with the game itself. We've got, I imagine that the risk component was looked at in terms of the expansion of the game, bringing in an 18th and 19th team. Papua New Guinea locked in, looking to go to Perth. We've got the announcement of 22 years in the making, an Ashes series. All these wonderful things happening in Las Vegas. Never has our game in Australia and New Zealand and the Pacific been as in such a strong position.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night? What issue could potentially see that suffer?
Yeah, good question.
From all the points around legal integrity and risk.
Yeah. My portfolio can be a little bit dire. I hope it's still interesting for your listeners. But before I address your question, I've just got to say, as a fan of the game, under the visionary leadership of Peter Volandis and the rest of the commission and our management team led by Andrew Abdo, it's just so pleasing to see the state of the game at the moment. Putting aside my role at the NRL, but as a supporter of the game since I was learnt to walk, to see where the game currently is, it's been through its ups and downs and trepidations over the year. To have former players like yourself speaking about the game in such high regard, and there's a number of other commentators that share similar sentiment, and our sort of growth trajectory that we're on, and bringing back the Ashes. One of the special things the last couple of days when they seen the announcement of the Ashes is looking back to some of those legends of the game playing in those test matches against England and Great Britain, and Ricky Stewart's and Mal Meninga and Bradley Clyde's and stuff, and now we're on the verge of that coming back. You also touched on some of the other really exciting things around Las Vegas and expansion of the competition, not just the NRL competition, but the women's competition. There's an opportunity to change the direction of Papua New Guinea using rugby league as a vehicle.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's just all so special and so positive. It's just a great position for the game to be in. But when you think about my role, we've got to just be diligent. And Peter, our chairman, always does refer to, every time we take a step, we have to do the due diligence on that. You'll hear Peter say that quite regularly. And the business case has to stack up, you'll hear Peter say. And that's so true. And what Peter's referring to there is obviously there's commercial elements to making these things work and growing the sport. But at the same time, there are risk elements as well that we need to make sure we do the due diligence on that to make sure, like I said, under our framework, we're informing ourselves the best we possibly can and then putting in place appropriate measures to address those risks. When you say, is there one particular issue that keeps me up at night? I couldn't say there's one. The portfolio is quite diverse. There's a lot of different things that might pop up from time to time. But yeah, I'm comforted by the fact that we have strong leadership that has their finger on the pulse. I'm comforted by the fact that I've got a terrific team at the NRL. I'm comforted by the fact that the clubs and the state leagues are in really good positions. There's a strong voice to represent the players. The players are terrific advocates for the game, phenomenal athletes. So I get comfort out of the fact that there's a lot of knowledgeable, experienced, good people in the game. That no matter what sort of pops up, we've we're well positioned to sort of address it.
I think I probably speak for most ex players, and although we look back on our time in the game with nostalgia and how great it was, and maybe we wouldn't change it for anything. There is a level of envy for the modern day player and the current player, and be like, wow, like going to Vegas, like, the Ashes. Like in my 15, 16 year career, we didn't have an Ashes tour. Played against Australia, but we didn't. I missed that period. Yeah, and I was close, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah, and I speak to some of the. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say I speak to some of the players, and particularly over in Las Vegas. I was over there this year, and they've got so much gratitude. They recognise it. This is like, how good is this? Like, here we are, we're in Las Vegas, and rugby league's being talked about. There's all these events. There's so many fans over here. We're working hard as a game together to try and penetrate the US market. Like, how good is this?
Yeah.
And players have that gratitude. And I sometimes reflect on it as well, and think about the training environment we had at Manly through these years, and training in old sort of sweaty old warehouses and unused car parks and things like that. And you compare it now to see the centre of excellence.
Yeah. So, every club has one.
It's just it's so good. Yeah,
it's become the standard, not the exception.
And you see that it's the evolution of professionalism as a game. We spoke about that a little bit before, and this is part of it, getting more and more professional. And it makes, I think it makes most ex players just really proud. Doubly proud when you can still, like you and I, still play a role in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, I've really enjoyed this chat. We've got the 4 questions for each and every guest, because we're aware of the time. We've been going for around about 2 hours, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. The dream spine, so you 1, 6, 7, 9.
So you said no rules here.
No rules, mate. Ones you've played with, ones you've played against. Yeah, so admired.
I self-imposed some rules. Okay. So I had to play either with or against.
Okay, that's fine.
And there's no restrictions on bias. So my one is Brett Stewart. His ability in attack was phenomenal. Anticipation. But one of the things that was great for a front rower is his talk and direction, defence. He was brilliant. Like telling you which side of the ruck you had to go. Small things.
It's worth its weight in goals. A fatigue.
Really vocal on the field, and a terrific teammate. Like talk about somebody off the field that it really gets the idea of a team and what works in a team. He'd be my one. My 6 is bias as well. We've mentioned his name already, but Jamie Lyon, the talent that he had, the composure, decision making when it came whether to run, whether to draw and pass, timing was just perfect. And again, I was co-captain with Jamie for a period of time, and he's got a different approach to leadership than I do, but it was, talk about it being an effective leader. Yeah. He knows how to build those connections really well with his teammates.
What a privilege it was to play with him for a couple of years.
Yeah. The 9, I can't go past Cameron Smith. Yeah. We had a lot of games against each other. You might have mentioned that period. Cameron's like his composure on the field, decision making, toughness, resilience, obviously his leadership. The thing that sticks out for me most is that Cameron played like in excess of 400 games, and he played 80 minutes a match, and he was a hooker.
Yeah,
and you know what that's like. You got to tackle us and all these big angry blokes that are running at you. And Cameron not only tackled them, but I remember getting tackled by him, and somehow I'd go in there with the mindset that I'm going to find my elbows and knees, and I'm almost twice the size of him. I'm going to bump him off and do this, and he somehow managed to find a way to get me onto my back, like 9 and his record speaks for himself. Obviously, Australia, Queensland, Melbourne Storm. Where does that leave me?
7.
7. The 7. Who did I have for 7? Andrew Johns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I had the privilege of playing against Andrew a couple of times, and his competitiveness on the field, just his defence was phenomenal for a halfback, and he game smarts. And you hear him now like talking on commentary and stuff. He's a couple of steps ahead of the game, and he knows exactly what teams are trying to do. And I remember as a front rower, scrambling to try and get back at marker or A or B defender. And when you knew you were playing against Andrew Johns, if you put a step wrong, he would pick you out. Yeah. You come off that line a bit sideways, or you're a bit late to get back, or you didn't move up fast enough. He wasn't looking to go anywhere else, but just try to ace your inside shoulder. And he picked it out nearly every time you make a small little error.
Yeah.
That's
not a bad spine, mate. Stuart, Lyon, John, Smith.
Yeah, it'd be pretty impressive if they play together.
Yeah. If football didn't exist, what do you think you'd be doing? Obviously, we spoke a lot around your off-field activities now, but is this a path you feel you would have gone down if sport wasn't there for you?
Yeah, I always had an admiration for sport, loved sport, all types of sport when I was young. So, and I got into my study. So, I think it's probably a path that I thought, that'd be great. But the other bit, when I was a young fella, I got inspired by Top Gun, like most young kids do. They watched Top Gun back in the 80s and 90s, Tom Cruise. And my father and my brother are both pilots, recreational pilots. So I always had an aspiration to become a pilot, and then watching Top Gun was just sort of become a pilot in the Air Force or something like that. But I think I quickly realised that I wouldn't fit in the cockpit. I better do something else.
Yeah. That
would have been an issue.
Smart realisation. A sliding doors moment that you maybe think about the alternative happening?
Yeah, I think for this one, I think it would be when I received like the first proper feedback playing footy. Bit of an unusual one, but Frank Panisi, who we know is a very good general manager for the Melbourne Storm, has been for a period of time. He is from my way on the Northern Beaches, and I've known Frank for a long time. And he was involved in the Manly Juniors when I was coming through, and I was always a kid that was never really selected. Loved my footy, probably never really got that fit. Probably never really sort of concentrated enough or took it serious enough. And I remember Frank and a few other people that relayed sort of a similar messages. I was in sort of tryouts, the possibles versus the probables type thing. And I remember Frank pulling me aside. It was one like weekday afternoon after school. It's like, all dark and stuff. And Frank just sort of gave me like really honest, blunt feedback. You then come to know that is part of the rugby league environment. And I even remember as a kid, no, it must have been about, it wasn't too much a kid, I would have been about maybe 17, so I'm nearly an adult. And I remember thinking about that feedback and thinking, oh, wow, that's, he's giving me a good rocket there. But thinking the sliding doors moment is there's probably two ways I could have gone.
Yeah.
I could have said, thanks for that. Just keep on doing the same thing. Do my best, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I really took it on board. And I then I started to train hard. And I started getting my diet in check. And the sliding doors moment is that it's then put me on, everything sort of fell in place from there. It's put me on this trajectory, which I find myself in this seat today. Feedback, as my boss says, Andrew says all the time, feedback is a gift. And that feedback from Frank Panisi back when I was a 17-year-old kid, aspiring to play rugby league, but not too sure whether I was good enough, is Frank said, do these things and you will you'll start going really well.
Do you know what, mate? You're 100% right, because I think about, I'm just thinking the alternative to that. Imagine seeing Frank Panisi on the Northern Beaches. Oh, hey, Jason, how are you, mate? Good. You know what? I was thinking about telling you to do these things. You probably could have made it. Yeah. You'd go, well, why didn't you? But some people, they take honest feedback like too personally, where it's like, they're trying, it's coming from a place to make you better.
Spot on.
Like, why would, I'd hate for that, to see a coach and be like, you know what, Jammer, you know what, I'd never, I always thought you should have done this. Why didn't you tell me? Yeah. Like, why hold back?
Yeah. Well, the opposite of that conversation could have been seeing Frank on the Northern Beaches, and he says to me, "Remember, Kingy, I gave you that feedback. You never took it on board.
Yeah.
what are you up to now? What
Yeah.
have you been doing for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Whereas, thankfully I had enough smarts back in the day and good parents, and Frank didn't have to, but he came out of the way. A kid that's trialling out, and I'd known Frank for a little while, and says, work on this, nail down, have a go. Anyway, I took it serious, and then everything sort of fell in place from there. So that's probably my sliding doors moment.
Finally, the most interesting person you've met on this journey so far.
Oh yeah, this is a hard one for me. This is the hardest question. I think it's sort of in my sort of current role at the moment, I always get fascinated when I get exposure to people that are currently judges, judges of the Supreme Court. I've spoken to a former judge of the High Court of Australia, and having conversations with them is just fascinating, given my interest in law and things like that. So I always find them really, really interesting. But if you go back to the previous life and think about the most interesting people I met when I was playing footy, I can't go past some of my teammates. And this is an expansive definition of interesting, but some of the real storytellers and the funny people that talk about people that come from diverse backgrounds and all different walks of life. And there was three people I thought of as that. They had me in hysterics. We were warming up, and these guys had me in hysterics. The stories they're telling, and Terry Hill was one. Yeah, rest in peace. He was a real character, and I played with Terry for I think it was a year or 2 years at Manly. He was a real character. I listened to every word he used to say. The second one was Chris Hicks. You remember playing for Manly?
He played for Warrington.
He played for Warrington.
Yeah.
He's a terrific guy, and he'd have the whole team in hysterics, telling stories of things that had happened to him. And on a similar vein was Travis Burns. You remember Travis Burns? That played at Seagulls for a while. I think where else did he? I think he went to Panthers at one stage.
I think he went over to England as well. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And those three guys, hanging off every story they tell, you're just engrossed. I just found them so funny, and then at the same time, in a weird sort of way, they were so interesting as well. So I couldn't confine it to one, but that was a collection of people that I find sort of fascinating, interesting, and funny all at the same time.
Fair play. Well, Jason, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit and talk with you. Honestly, mate, I've loved every moment of it. It's been great to sit down, pick your brain. Your career was amazing. I love those battles, love that rivalry.
Run again, son.
And the work that you're doing now, it can be, almost, it's going on in the background, but it's so important. We need that to cover areas that some of us don't consider as, the day-to-day. We're so focused on the 8 games of the weekend, we forget about the stuff going on in the background, but it's vital with just how big the competition is and just how important it is. So thank you.
No, thanks very much, Gemma. I've really enjoyed it as well, and it's been terrific catching up with you. Thanks,
Perfect. Brilliant.